Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
My name is Mo Fredette, a member of the American Legion Hayes-Velhage Post 96, your host for today's program. And on behalf of all veterans of West Hartford, it is my privilege and honor to welcome you to our Veterans Day ceremony.
Detail. All 10, cut! Color guard. Forward, march. Post colors. Post colors. Detail. Present. Order. 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 Color guard, fall in.
Please be seated. As veterans, we are acutely aware of the sacrifices made by our service members. We are equally aware of the cost of those sacrifices. We know the value and the lessons that our military service bestow upon us, and these are things that we cannot afford to lose to time. Our community, throughout its history, has always honored its veterans for their service. Tributes to our veterans is demonstrated in memorials such as the memorial at Town Hall, our veterans skating rink, the Veterans Highway, which passes through Elmwood Center, and Sterling Field, which honors the bravery of the first World War II casualty from West Hartford, Jim Sterling. As a member of the Army Air Corps, he was stationed in Hawaii on December 7th, 1941, as the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Sterling took to the skies in defense of his country. After engaging 6 Japanese planes and destroying one, Sterling was shot down from behind and listed as missing in action. Sterling Field is a tribute for his bravery. The Connecticut Veterans Memorial, West Hartford, at the intersection of the heart of our community, pays tribute to the men and women of our community who made the supreme sacrifice in times of conflict that engaged our nation. Although we are not at the monument today, we are here to honor the courage, strength of our military has shown throughout our nation's history. Let us not forget that the men and women of our armed forces are defending us 365 days a year. The heroism that has been demonstrated time and again by veterans from American Revolution to the global war on terrorism is sometimes unnoticed by those of us who enjoy the security that their sacrifice has provided. At this time, I would like to ask Reverend Dana Hallenbach to offer the invocation.
Please rise. Assalamu alaikum, shalom alaikum, peace be with you. I always start my benedictions with that, and I want you to take a moment to look around at those veterans who are here today to be able to say thank you that I, in freedom, can speak those words, and that we in freedom can worship and walk this wonderful country that we have. Thank you. O Creator of the universe, you did not form Adam from the dust of the world so that his children would spill their brother's blood in that dust. With Adam's sin came death, destruction, and war. Yet you did not turn your back on your creation, But still, humanity rebels and evil flourishes with wars and rumors of war. Young men and women today protect our nation in the profession of arms, even now serving in places of danger to shield us from the manifest evil of terrorism, weapons of mass destruction, and other wicked instruments of Satan's hatred. I pray, dear Lord of peace, that you would protect all those who wear the uniform of our country and serve with courage, honor, and commitment. Comfort and strengthen our soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, and Coast Guardsmen. Be with their loved ones who must wait at home while they go to far and distant lands answering the call of duty. Bless the faithful ministry of the chaplains who go with them to proclaim their gospel message and minister to their spiritual needs. Guide the leaders of this world that they would seek to walk in peace so that the skills of warriors may not be used except to deter those who would seek to harm us. Father, in your name we ask this. Amen. You may be seated.
Thank you, Reverend. I would like to take a moment to share some information about Reverend Hallenbach. He is a graduate of Conard High School. He attended Dean College and Ithaca College before returning to West Hartford, where he served on the West Hartford Police Department for over 20 years, and then was asked to become the Director of Public Works for the town of West Hartford, a position he held for 15 years until his retirement in 2009. Reverend Hallenbach served as pastor of Zion Lutheran Church in Manchester for 12 years, and we thank you for joining us today, Reverend. We are honored today to have the Color Guards of the West Hartford Police Department, the West Hartford Fire Department, and American Legion, Post 96. With us serving as Sergeant of the Guards today will be Lieutenant Eric Rocheleau. Sergeant of the Guards, call the units to attention and present arms. Today our national anthem, please stand. Today our national anthem will be sung by Stephanie Reuning-Scherer.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Detail. Order. Arm.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Stephanie. Stephanie is a junior at Conard High School, and later in the program will be leading us in the singing of God Bless America. At this time, I'd like to take a moment to recognize some of the people who have joined us here today. Mayor Shari Cantor, Deputy Mayor Beth Kerrigan, Councilman Leon Davidoff, Councilman Chris Barnes, Lee Gold, Lee, Carol Anderson Blanks, Amanda Aronson, excuse me, Matt Hart, State Representative Joe Varengia, and also Navy Captain James Cayley, who has joined us today as well. Welcome. Our guest speaker for today's ceremony is Captain Patricia Murphy, United States Public Health Service. She received her commission in 1991 and has served in many capacities with the United States Public Health Service. Captain Murphy grew up in the North Shore region of Massachusetts and is a graduate of the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy, located in Boston. Prior to receiving her commission, she served as supervisory pharmacist of the research inpatient outpatient pharmacies and a member of the Quality Assurance Utilization Review staff at the Department of Veterans Affairs in Dallas, Texas. She is currently assigned to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration as a regulatory officer. She was the first team leader of the Northeast Regional Incident Support Team when it was established in 2009 and continues as an active member of the team. Captain Murphy has received many awards, including the Surgeon General's Exemplary Service Medal and the Crisis Response Service Award. Captain Murphy and her husband live here in West Hartford and have 2 daughters and 2 grandsons. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Murphy.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Is that good? Okay, good. I want to thank the American Legion for inviting me to speak today. I'm sorry? Oh, louder? Maybe a little bit closer? Or maybe I can make this. Is that a little better? Yeah. Okay, good. Good. Well, welcome to today's ceremony and thank you for attending. We're here today to honor service members and to remember the sacrifices they have made. I want to take a couple of minutes to tell you a little bit about the United States Public Health Service, to which I am commissioned. We are one of the 7 uniformed services of the United States, all of which fall under the executive branch. I know you all know who's under the Department of Defense. That would be I'm going to do it alphabetically. Air Force, Army, Marines, and Navy. And then we have the Department of Homeland Security, who houses the Coast Guard. And then there's me, under the Department of Health and Human Services. And you all probably, well, you hear about them a lot during the hurricane season. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, they're another uniformed service. They're known as NOAA, and you probably hear them often during hurricane season. They fall under the Department of Commerce. So the U.S. Public Health Service Commission Corps is a team of approximately 6,500 officers. The majority of us are healthcare professionals, physicians, dentists, nurses, nurse practitioners, pharmacists like me, social workers, the licensed social workers for counseling, scientists, we have scientists, the environmental health officers. I don't want to forget anybody, but there's several categories that fall within the United States Public Health Service. Our mission is to protect, promote, and advance the health and safety of our nation. This has been our mission since 1798. We trace our beginnings back to the U.S. Marine Hospital Service, protecting against the spread of disease from sailors returning from foreign ports and maintaining the health of immigrants entering the country. Congress charged us with preventing the introduction and spread of major epidemic diseases and to carry out the medical inspection of arriving immigrants, such as those landing at Ellis Island in New York City. Today's Commission Corps officers work abroad as well as in the United States to help prevent the spread of infections and communicable diseases. As I said, the Corps includes a number of professions that are involved in public health. So you ask, how do we serve? What is it that we do? Well, we perform clinical practice. We're assigned to different agencies to cover the health service units. We educate individuals and communities about public health. We develop and implement public health programs and lead public health organizations. And we participate in disaster response efforts. I'm sure many of you have seen us, you just didn't know it was us because we don't have our own uniform. Most of us wear, most of our uniforms are actually Navy uniforms, and except for our operational uniform, which we now wear the Coast Guard uniform. But we all have our PHS insignia, and that's what identifies us as public health service officers. Commissioned Corps serves throughout the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and also with some federal agencies outside the department. So at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, we conduct and report on disease surveillance activities. Officers assigned to the CDC deploy to several countries in West Africa where they conduct disease tracking and work with local authorities to effect cultural and behavioral change. At the Bureau of Prisons, which is where my commission, when I was commissioned, I was sent to the Bureau of Prisons. We work for the Health Services Division and provide and manage a variety of physical and mental health care services. At the Environmental Protection Agency, we write and implement safe drinking regulations, and we conduct waste management programs to contain contamination of the public water systems. At the Food and Drug Administration, where I'm assigned, we serve as regulatory officers and project managers. At the Indian Health Service, where we have probably, I think the majority of our officers may be assigned at Indian Health Service, we provide health care and related services to American Indian and Alaska Native populations. This service may take our officers to some of the most remote areas of our country. And what I'm explaining to you right now, these are our day jobs. We have other jobs. At the National Institute, at the National Institute of Health, we plan, support, and direct clinical research programs. We provide health care to the Coast Guard. So if you've been treated at the Coast Guard, you've been treated by one of us. Officers assigned to the Coast Guard wear the same service uniform as any Coast Guard commissioned officer. But again, you can tell it's a public health service officer by the insignia that's on their shirt. We're often called upon by other federal, state, and local agencies to aid and augment in times when those agencies' resources are overwhelmed. Throughout my career as a PHS officer, I've seen officers deployed in response to natural and human disasters, hurricane responses, such as Sandy, Katrina, Gustav, Maria. We were in Puerto Rico quite a while. We took care of the responders after the 9/11 attack. We treated the postal workers during the post-anthrax threat. Several officers reported to Flint, Michigan due to their water situation, earthquake in Haiti, suicide response in the American Indian community, oil spill cleanup down on the Gulf Coast, flooding in the Midwest, and several national security events. When thousands of unaccompanied minors crossed into the United States from Mexico in 2014, this triggered a humanitarian crisis. Officers were sent to the Southwest to provide a variety of services, including medical screenings and behavioral health support. During this current crisis involving migrant children separated from parents at the border, we have taken the lead in the behavioral health support to reunite families. A team of officers were sent to Liberia in response to the Ebola crisis. These officers staffed a 25-bed hospital to treat medical providers who felt ill after treating Ebola patients. A year later, pharmacy officers returned to Liberia to serve as the U.S. pharmacy officer for the NIH Ebola vaccine clinical trial. In addition to disaster response, we frequently partner with the U.S. Navy on their health diplomacy missions. We have been part of the Navy's Pacific Partnership in the Pacific Basin and Continuing Promise in the Caribbean West Atlantic since 2007. Such missions are often carried out on either the U.S. Navy's commissioned hospital ships, the USNS Mercy or the USNS Comfort, but there have been other ships. These are just some examples of our assignments. I'm sure I've forgotten many of our officers, but it's just a wide variety of work that we are involved in. There's hundreds of duty stations across the country and around the world in which we proudly serve. But I also want to tell you a little bit about what we do for the veterans, so I'm going to stop there and stop talking about us. We have had a signed memorandum of agreement with the VHA since 2017. Under this initial 5-year commitment, we're able to provide full-time direct patient care to veterans in VHA hospitals and clinics in underserved communities. We're still working on getting that initiative fully up to speed, but we're excited about the potential of the Commission Corps to contribute to advancing the quality of care within the VA. As a former civilian pharmacist from the VA, I am just delighted beyond measure that we will be assisting the VA in providing health care. As you know, our Surgeon General has taken the lead in the opioid crisis. We provide support for substance abuse prevention, treatment, and recovery services. We have programs throughout the country serving our veterans and their families. To address behavioral health issues associated with combat deployments, the Department of Defense and the U.S. Public Health Service signed a memorandum of agreement in 2018, establishing the DoD-USPHS Partnership for Psychological Health Initiative. The initiative was designed to ensure that service members, their families, and veterans receive the resources they need by increasing the availability of behavioral health services such as psychiatric counseling, family and group therapy, and preventive services. Behavioral health officers are detailed to military medical treatment facilities across the nation to treat service members who are returning from overseas deployments with conditions such as post-traumatic stress disorder, insomnia, anxiety, flashbacks, and depression. I just want to add here, when you see those officers at those medical treatment facilities, you will see them in the PHS uniform. So I was on an Army base recently, and the pharmacy, no, it wasn't a pharmacy officer, it was a behavioral health officer, was wearing a PHS uniform. So we don't always wear the uniform of the service that we are assigned to. I think it's just when we go to Coast Guard. Several officers serve as specialty program directors in many hard-to-fill locations. The DoD tells us where there's a need, and that's where we fill the need. We address post-deployment and other military-related psychological health concerns, and we implement and employ a variety of behavioral health treatment programs. The programs are usually intensive outpatient programs, day treatment programs, partial hospitalization programs, and residential treatment programs. Similar to any broad-based health program, identifying and evaluating effectiveness is essential for treatment success, especially during this implementation phase. The agreement between the Department of Defense and the Commission Corps increases behavioral health services availability to military service members. As you can see, while PHS officers don't bear arms like other services, we are an important part of supporting the mission of all the uniformed services by what we do. Veterans Day serves a very important purpose. It is the day we recognize not just those who have given their lives in a war, but all those that have worn the uniforms of service. This day, above all, is an opportunity to celebrate the choice one makes to serve his or her country. I want to close by saying it has been a great honor for me to be here. I am humbled by being in the presence of so many veterans. You have made a difference in the lives of so many, and we are deeply grateful. I am honored to speak with you today on such an important occasion. Thank you to those who have served and those who continue to serve today.
Thank you, Captain Murphy. Our next speaker is a member of the American Legion Hayes-Velhage Post 96, a Marine veteran. Say a few words, Patrick Harrell.
Mayor Cantor, Captain Murphy, honored guests, fellow veterans and citizens. Last year, we observed on this day the centennial of the closing of the Great War, the war to end all wars. This year marks the 100-year anniversary of the founding of the American Legion on the heels of that Great War. And we celebrate this birthday along with 2 million other Legion members across 13,000 posts located throughout all of the United States, its territories, and overseas locations. This centennial year also saw a change in the rules of the National Service Act, the Legion Act, that was passed by Congress and signed by the President, that allows for millions of veterans to access American Legion programs and benefits for which they previously had not been eligible. Prior to this signing, only veterans from the wartime periods were qualified. The gaps in these war eras were largely during the Cold War period, a time when threats to our nation, security was real, especially to the men and women in uniform. Recognizing the service of these peacetime veterans is certainly the right thing to do. Especially since their efforts contributed to the readiness that provided and ensured those quiet periods. This year also marks the centennial of the Paris Peace Conference, where leaders from the victorious Allied countries gathered together to set the peace terms for the defeated Central Powers, and may have unwittingly laid the seeds for a second global conflict that would take place in just 2 decades, as well as several other breaks in the chain of peace in places like Korea and Vietnam. Vietnam was my experience. I shared it with roughly 3 million other American men and women. The names of the 58,000 for whom it was the final experience are carved in a wall of black marble in Washington, D.C. How many have been to the wall? That's great. Like all memorials, it's a powerful and moving work of art. This year also celebrated the 50-year anniversary of 2 major events in our history: the moon landing and walk, and Woodstock. Both events missed by me, as I was in harm's way in the jungles of Vietnam. In my first day in country, I joined my unit engaged in a battalion size, that's 800 men, a battalion size combat operation on the coastal area known as Chu Lai. It was a textbook operation with opening naval gunfire, fixed-wing air support, and swarms of choppers that shuttle men, supplies, and wounded back and forth from the ships offshore. We watched the whole thing all day on a carrier, about a dozen of us that had come in that morning and had been flown to the carrier and were waiting to be lifted in to our units. Later that night, in the calmness that followed that harrowing day, I sat in my foxhole dug very near the tanks and far too deep compared to the other foxholes around me. And I gazed up at that bright, moonlit sky, thinking, those guys are up there. Because earlier that day, Neil Armstrong had taken his one small step for a man and giant leap for mankind. I didn't know until this year that that was televised globally. And I couldn't help but wonder about the steps and leaps that lay ahead for me. One day down, 363 and awake to go. And Gary knows the meaning of that. Well, I was able to complete my short time calendar, coloring in all the little squares, like the paint by the number kind of thing, till I got down to the day that I could get on the bird and go back to the world. That's what we used to say. And like most veterans, tucked that year's experience back into the far reaches, my mind. 30 years later, one of my sisters is taking advanced courses to move from an LPN to an RN designation. And she had enrolled in an elective history course taught at Manchester Community College, oddly titled Vietnam. And near the end of the semester, she asked if I would attend the course with her as a guest speaker. Well, that coming out experience was a healing one. So after finishing the course, she passed all the books and materials, and there were quite a few, to me. And in one of them, I ran across a poem that had immense impact. And I'd like to share it today with you. It's called At the Vietnam Wall. Because I never knew you, nor you did me, I come. Because you left behind mother, father, and betrothed, and I, wife and children, I come. Because love is stronger than enmity and can bridge oceans, I come. Because you never return, and I do, I come. That poem was written in 1995 by a man named Duong Tong, a former NVA soldier. I like to think that I and my platoon survived that year's ordeal, primarily due to a respect and a compassion that we held for the other side. One of my uncles always used to tell me, if you want to catch a fish, you have to think like a fish. Most Americans, like myself, were committed to one tour of 13 months shortened to 12 when I was over there. Our adversary was there until they won or died. I pray that the next conflict be a global one, a united world campaign against the pollutants that sour our planet's ecology. This blue marble spaceship that we call Earth is unique in the universe. We're seeing that with all the vessels we send out. And so it won't be easily replaced. Service to our nation, our veterans, our community, and our youth, the veterans of tomorrow, constitutes the American Legion's mission and defines 4 pillars of its organization. And as you just heard earlier, it also defines the mission of other noteworthy organizations. So it's fitting that we all come together annually on this Veterans Day and again on Memorial Day to honor and remember all those that serve now, have in the past, and will in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pat. Our next speaker, Mayor Shari Cantor, needs very little introduction. A lifelong resident of West Hartford, Mayor Cantor has served on the town council since 2004, and in 2016 assumed the position of mayor and was re-elected last week. Mayor Cantor's leadership has gained West Hartford the title of one of the best places to live in America, according to Money Magazine, and the only town in Connecticut to earn that distinction. Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Cantor.
Vertically challenged, Mayor. I'm very choked up. Not only was I fighting bronchitis, but I am so choked up by your comments and your honest. No, and we are, Commander Harrell. We're very, very blessed to have you share your experience, your thoughts with us, and I can't imagine how difficult that was. It really means so much to us. Thank you to Dana for coming home for a little bit, sharing yourself with us again. A gentleman to the core, and we're so privileged and lucky to have you here. Mo, thank you for your leadership and support for everybody in our community, and especially for veterans and your leadership with Veterans Affairs. And Captain Murphy, thank you for teaching us about what the U.S. Public Health Service does and how you impact country, the world, and veterans, and touch them all so profoundly. So I appreciate. Also want to thank all of you for being here, my elected official family for being here with us today, and our town manager, who is also a veteran, who is in the audience today. Passive war veteran that now can participate in the American Legion activities, right? So thank you so much. I also want to give, I saw our town historian is in the back. I want to thank you for being here too. Oh my gosh, I must say that your voice, Stephanie, is golden and beautiful. I'm really looking forward to hearing it again. Thank you to our color guard for being here and supporting this event. It's really important. I want to thank our Veterans Affairs Commission, Garrett Sheehan, who is the chair, and all the members of the Veterans Affairs. Thank you so much. None of this could have happened without the Veterans Affairs Commission, but also our own Renee McHugh, who puts all of the pieces together to coordinate this for the town. When major hostilities of World War I were formally ended on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in the 1918 armistice with Germany, that became Armistice Day. In 1938, November 11th became a national holiday. And then in 1954, after urging of many U.S. veteran organizations, President Dwight D. Eisenhower changed the name from Armistice Day to Veterans Day to recognize veterans of all American wars. But this day actually first was observed in the wake of the Civil War, where local communities organized tributes around grave sites of fallen soldiers. So as we observe Veterans Day today, November 11th, 2019, we're going to take a little look back to a veteran of the Civil War in West Hartford. This story was brought to me by our town historian, Tracy Wilson, researched and reported by Jennifer DeColomatos, our director of our Noah Webster House, additional research by archivist Sheila Daly, and research by Kate Campbell, a student of Jack Dougherty's at Trinity, in their book, On the Line. Let's meet John Braxton Robinson. Mr. Robinson lived for many years on the northeast corner of Farmington Avenue and Pleasant Street. He had come to West Hartford in 1868 following the Civil War. Mr. Robinson was a Civil War veteran. He grew up in Essex County, Virginia, though. He was an African American born into a family of enslaved people. When Connecticut 22nd Infantry came to Virginia in the spring of 1863, Mr. Robinson enlisted under the name John Smith and traveled north with the Connecticut Regiment in June of that same year. When the 22nd mustered out of service in July of 1863, Robinson joined a New York regiment and then was transferred to the 8th United States Infantry. During his service, most of which was spent at the Siege of Petersburg, Virginia, Robinson engaged in 5 battles and 12 skirmishes. He was wounded in the fall of 1864 and discharged from service in the summer of 1865. He settled in West Hartford in 1868, where he worked as a fish peddler. He married Lucy Allen Mason in 1871, and they had 3 children: Burris Hubbard Robinson of Hartford, James Henry Robinson of Ocean City, New Jersey, and Mrs. Mary A. Williams of Hartford. In 1915, as the Jim Crow era was rearing its ugly head on the 50th anniversary of the Civil War, Robinson was surprisingly and impressively included and recognized in the Hartford Courant. The Hartford Courant, right before Memorial Day in 1914, stated that men who fought for the Union a half a century ago now play an important part in the business life of the town, and talked about Mr. Robinson. That was profound. J.B. Robinson lived on the corner of Farmington, this is from the article, until his death in 1918 at the age of 70. And according to the article, an obituary published in the Courant, Mr. Robinson was born in 1847. That would have made him 16 years old when he joined the Connecticut 22nd Infantry. The same article suggests that Mr. Robinson may have joined the Union Army to escape the bonds of slavery. J. Braxton Robinson of Farmington Avenue had this are in quotes from the article, had an interesting career and can tell many telling tales of war and conditions previous to the war in the South. Mr. Robinson enlisted in the 22nd Regiment Connecticut Volunteers when it was doing service in the South. Upon return to the North, he came home with it. He could not remain North long. His own people in Virginia were then slaves, and took the first opportunity, which were only 2 months later, to enlist with another regiment being formed in New York. He was at the Battle at Petersburg and engaged 5 battles and 12 skirmishes. He was wounded at Fair Oaks October 13th in 1864 and was discharged in June 24th, 1865. Again, under the enlisted name of John Smith, not even his own name. To really understand the story behind the newspaper clipping, and again, it's really profound that he was included in this newspaper clipping, let's understand what a non-white person in West Hartford experienced. In 1930, when his house actually was handed down, when he died, after he died, his house was handed down to his son. The 1930 census, West Hartford's non-white population totaled 129 people, making up 0.5% of West Hartford's total residents. Of these 129 people, only 30 lived in households headed by a non-white. 90 of the 129 were servants in a white household, 70% of them, showing that the overwhelming pattern in West Hartford was that non-whites lived here as servants. Within the town, 6 of the 15 districts did not act as home to any non-white residents at all. The percentages of the districts range from 0% to 2% of the population. The district with the largest percentage, interesting, was on the Hartford and Bloomfield border, with 1,021 residents. As a live-in domestic service, it would have been very difficult to pass on any wealth to your next generation. With that in mind, the story of our own Civil War hero, John, becomes even more amazing. As evidenced by the research, the Robinson family were one of the few families who did live independently. They owned a home at 1070 Farmington Avenue, and in 1930, the census claims it was worth $30,000. Burrist, John and Lucy's son, was the head of the household at 58 years old. His father, Braxton, was born in Virginia, his mother in Massachusetts. He was born in Connecticut and had a brother and sister, like I said, the 3 children. Elizabeth was 55 years old. Parents were born in Maryland and Delaware. That was his wife. I'm sorry, that was the other sister. The 2 brothers were listed as farmers. It was nearly impossible for African American men only, even, to acquire and win any sort of wealth and to be independent. So again, this was profound and unique. And you had nothing to pass on. As for the Robinsons, it seemed that home ownership did provide help for their kids' generation, but it seemed to end there. Once they moved to West Hartford, their family house, so Burris, the oldest son, moved when John died in 1918. He was listed as a gardener, not a farmer, as was his brother James. And sometime in 1930s, the house was bought and demolished, and to make room for garden apartments, which still stand there today. The second generation Robinsons relocated to Hartford in the 40s, but it seems like they weren't able to purchase a home and the wealth was not passed down. This short historic description of this one African American Civil War veteran is just a drop in the bucket of the millions of stories of American veterans. Veterans of all races and creeds, genders and religions. My own grandfather was 16 when he left religious persecution in Russia to join the U.S. Army and could not speak English, and fought and was wounded in France and came home to start a life and work at the U.S. Postal Office. And as we mark this Veterans Day, we recognize all of these untold stories. We remember today the experience and service of one of our own community, but we think about the experiences of all of our veterans and their families. I think now of my nephew who is not going to be able to come home on Thanksgiving because he's serving in the Air Force. Veterans sacrifice for our country, and they have earned our lasting gratitude. As we honor our veterans and we remember their great deeds, let us also salute those who are currently fighting for our freedom. We think about you and thank you and your families who also give so much. We say God bless all of you. God bless the town of West Hartford, the state of Connecticut, our country, and our world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor. The ceremonial laying of a wreath at a gravesite or memorial is practiced around the world. Heads of state, U.S. presidents, military, and veterans honor departed members of the armed forces or society by laying a wreath of flowers and greenery at that site. At this time, we'd like to call forward Army veteran Jeff Linden will present the wreath, and we'd like to ask the mayor and Captain Murphy to join me up here. Thank you. Thank you. At the conclusion of this ceremony, this wreath will be placed over in the cemetery on North Main Street, where residents of West Hartford who fought in earlier conflicts are buried. We've also placed wreaths at the Veterans Memorial and at Fairview Cemetery as well. Before I invite Stephanie to come back up and lead us in the God Bless America, a little bit more information about her. She's a junior at Conard High School, as I had said. Sings with Conard's solo choir, the Conard Jazz Band, and with her church choir. She participates in the West Hartford Summer Arts Festival musical theater productions, as well as Conard's musicals. She hopes to pursue a career in music through high school and college, and I suggested Broadway. Stephanie.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the valleys, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Very good.
Thank you again, Stephanie. Beautiful voice, certainly. But please be seated. I'd like to say a special thank you to the First Church Congregational for opening their doors to provide a wonderful place for holding our ceremony today. At this time, I'd like to ask Reverend Hamelbeck to come back and offer the benediction.
You can stand up again. In my benediction, I use the American Sign Language symbol for I love you. It's a reminder God loves you, I love you, and we're called to love each other. But in intention to be able to communicate silently, I would ask that you would not be silent with your love towards the veterans and towards our country and towards this world. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with favor and grant you his peace. Amen.
Amen. Our bugler, Peter Rowe, who is a member of our post, took ill this weekend and is unable to join us today. He has sounded taps for us for the last 10 years, I believe, at this time. So we've asked for a replacement, which is our commander with his phone.
I love improvise adapt and overcome.
Thank God for cell phones.
Detail. All tank. Show. Present. Arms.
Taps was first played in Harrison Landing, Virginia in July of 1862. Within 9 months, it was adopted by both Union and Confederate forces. In 1891, taps became the standard component of U.S. military funerals.
Detail. Order. Arm.
I'd like to add that the original tune for taps, much longer tune, but since they played it both sides, and they took over 650,000 casualties, more than all the other wars we've fought in, collectively. More were lost. Well, Americans were fighting each other, but more were lost during the Civil War than all the others combined. So they needed to shorten the music, so it's 24 notes.
Thank you very much for coming this morning. As you leave the Veterans Day Memorial Ceremony today, please consider taking a short walk across the street to our Veterans Memorial there. May God bless each of you. May God bless and protect our servicemen and women in harm's way. May God bless our veterans who have kept our country free, and may God bless America. Thank you for joining us today.